Welcome to this lesson on identifying your audience and your report type. In this lesson, we will be focusing on the second phase of the requirements gathering process, which is the part where we identify the audience and the types of personas that are going to be using this report. And with that, we are also going to define the report type for those specific personas. This analysis should be done alongside the other tasks of the first stage of the requirements gathering process, which are determining your business goals and pain points and defining UI requirements. So I grouped this like in one main group, which is the first stage of the requirements gathering, and then my recommendation is for you to do the second stage of the requirements gathering process, which is the user journeys, in a different type of session. From my experience, the definition of the user journeys should be done in a different session because it can take quite some time to go through this. In this stage, you will learn exactly what the user will want to see, and you will understand the journey that they will take in your report. And I think this is the stage that will influence the most the way you will be designing your report later on. Like interactions, navigation, information architecture, everything comes together in the user journeys. So that's why I think this should be like a separate session with your stakeholders. But we are here to talk about the audience for your report, personas, report types, and not about user journeys yet. So let's talk a little bit more about the audience types that you can have in your reports. I want to start by saying that your audience and the report type that you will end up building are very closely linked. As you can see from this slide, we can say that we usually have 4 types of audiences for our reports. We have the executive, we have the analyst, we have the operational, and then we have the more generic type of persona. And you can also see that we have already an idea of the report types that each of these personas will probably want to consume. An executive will probably prefer to look at the dashboard, which is more like high-level information and metrics. An analyst will probably want to dig a little bit deeper. They don't want to see just the high-level insights. They want to drill down or drill through and analyze those insights in a little bit more detail. They will probably have some follow-up questions that they want that report to answer. Then we have the operational type of reports, and these reports are usually for the operational kind of audience or persona. This kind of persona usually wants to see things like in a lot of detail. They want to see things by second, like transactional type of data. Like every transaction that happens, they want to see that. These are the types of personas that really need these reports to run operations. They really need insights in a lot of detail. And then you have the more generic kind of persona or general kind of persona. This is more like for informative kind of reports that don't really have, let's say, a specific purpose. Probably not the best wording, but I think you get it. So let's put it this way. But it's more important for exploratory analysis and not necessarily to answer a business question. It is more for people to explore data the way they want, and everyone will have kind of a very different question to answer based on that more generic report. It's more for exploration, like I said, but I will give you a few examples later on what exactly this represents, and I think everything will be a lot clearer to you. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but from my description, you can see that if we go from the executive persona to the general persona, from the left to the right, and we also look at the types of reports that these personas will probably want to consume, we can see that we go from the more kind of high-level reporting solution, which is a dashboard, to the more specific and detailed kind of report, which is the operational or general. So depending on who your audience is, and you really need to define who those people are, you will end up with different types of reports. When I was doing my presentations to conferences and Power BI meetups, I got this question a couple of times, which is, what if I have more than one type of persona that is going to be looking at this report? Well, in that case, my suggestion is for you to really understand if you should be building one report or multiple reports for these different types of personas. If you have, let's say, an executive that is part of your stakeholders, and then you have like some manager from, I don't know, more related to operations, they will probably have very different views on what they want in that report. You will need to evaluate with those stakeholders if it makes sense to have one report for both personas. In the case of two reports, you would have one that is more oriented to one type of persona and another report that is more oriented to the second type of persona. For example, one that is more oriented to the executive kind of persona, so it's going to be more like high-level metrics, visuals and charts, something more like a dashboard style, and another one that is way more detailed, another report that is way more detailed so you can fulfill requirements and needs of the operational type of persona. User journeys will help you evaluate if you need one report or two reports in the cases where you have to fulfill the needs of more than one persona. So by understanding the journey that the different types of personas will have when they open your report, you will understand if their vision and the way they are going to interact with it, with that report, is so different that you can't just fit everything into one. I think in the end, it's a question of evaluating the needs of the different personas and trying to understand the amount of work involved in building just one solution that fulfills the needs of two or three different types of personas, or three different solutions that will individually fulfill the needs of each one of those types of personas. So which one will give you more work? In a different way of saying it, because in the end it's not about the insights, right? Because you will try to show the exact same insights both ways, but one of them will give you a lot more work and trouble than the other. So just evaluate that and go for the option that looks more efficient and makes more sense to you in terms of time of development, that solution. So let's talk in a bit more detail about the executive type of persona. So the executive will be the person in charge of making plans and decisions that often involve a medium or long-term focus. This is the reason why usually they don't really want to dig into the details of why this metric doesn't look correct or why are we below target. I think they just go to the person directly and ask because they don't want to go and do all these crazy things in a report when they can just go to whoever that is responsible for example, for marketing, and just ask why is this KPI so low. We then probably enter into a slightly different kind of persona, and this marketing manager will have reports in a lot more detail where you can answer the questions from, in this case, the CEO, the CFO, the director or vice president. And usually all these roles are related to this kind of persona and dashboard report type, like the high level kind of metrics. So they mainly want to understand on a high level all the business, how the business is operating. In terms of the roles that we usually see for this kind of persona, like I mentioned, it can be things like CEO, CFO, director, vice president, and obviously the report type that we are talking about here is the dashboard report type. Usually with 1 or 2 pages, something simple, easy to read, easy to understand, easy insights in a way. They literally want the data to work for them. They don't want to work for the data. So make the data work for them. Their focus is making data-driven decisions for the medium or long term. The granularity, we talked about this already. It's kind of high-level metrics, and they want the data to work for them. They don't want to work for the data. In terms of the timeline, usually this type of persona wants to look at 2 or 3 years worth of data, maybe 5 years worth of data, because of course this is based on my experience and it does depend on the CEO or the CFO or the vice president, and in the use case, of course. But they do want it at an aggregated level, like year level or month level or country level or regional level. They don't want to go into the details and transactional kind of data and understand what exactly is happening with this little thing in this particular area. This is not the role of the executive usually. The type of insights that they will want to look at and consume are indicators like actual versus targets, status of the business processes, KPIs, and trends over time. Your report should be answering high-level questions like how are we doing or are we there yet? and you should be answering these questions with visuals like KPI cards, multi-row cards, line charts, bar charts, area charts, and you should definitely be avoiding visualization types that go into a lot of granularity and detail like matrices and tables or combo charts, anything that takes a lot of time to read and process, and it's just very, very granular information for this type of persona, and this type of persona will not really want to see that kind of very detailed information. Let's have a look at an example of a dashboard. I took this example from Microsoft. Sorry, not sorry, and thank you, Microsoft. I mean, it is a good example. When I say dashboard, I want to say this. When I say dashboard, I know that the wording that I'm using in terms of Power BI means different things, even though the entire internet seems to disagree sometimes. So a dashboard in Power BI is basically a combination of visuals from different reports, right? And in this case, I'm treating dashboard as like the more high-level kind of report and not like the dashboard that I usually associate with Power BI on the service, right? But let's talk about the example. As we can see by the visualizations on this example, they are very simple visualizations in a way. You have the KPIs with information on if the metrics are on target or not. You have trends over time, all the things that we talked about in the previous slide. You can see here, it's high-level metrics just showing the status of the business overall. Nothing very fancy, nothing very complicated, nothing very detailed, just enough information for the person to make their decisions, and that's it. Now let's talk about the analyst. Generally, the analyst is looking for ways to help a department operate more efficiently and more effectively. This kind of persona, again, goes into a little bit more detail than the executive type of persona with their dashboard report type. The type of roles that you usually see for this type of persona are things like business analyst, head of sales, head of HR, and so on. In this case, we are not talking about those kind of high-level dashboards anymore. We want something, again, in a little bit more detail. We want a proper report that allows you to drill through, that has tooltips to provide a little bit more details on the insights that you're looking at. So in this scenario, building a report for this kind of persona will probably involve a little bit more technique in Power BI, especially around bookmarks, around drill-through pages, around tooltips or custom tooltips. These little things that you probably need to start thinking about now for this kind of persona. Their focus is to make data-driven decisions on a medium term, and in terms of granularity, they will want to see high-level metrics, but they want that ability to drill through and to see things in more detail, those metrics in a little bit more detail. They usually don't need or don't want a long timeline. They want 1 or 2 years worth of data, and usually they don't want it in a very, very granular way. They want it aggregated at like week level or month level preferably. They still go for the kind of same type of data visualization as the executive person, though they go for KPIs or indicators, targets, statuses, and trends too. These reports will be used to answer questions like how did this happen or what might happen next, and the preferred visualization types for this kind of persona. The analysts are KPI cards, multi-row cards, line charts, bar charts, maps, combo charts. So you will usually use a broader range of visualization types than you would use with the executive type of persona. However, you would still avoid visualization types that go into a lot of granularity like matrices and tables. So let's look at the example now. This is another example kindly provided by Microsoft. It was not provided. I kind of took this from their webpage, and you can see here this example is not as simplistic in a way as the dashboard type of report. You can see we already have here navigation pane on the left, we have tabs on one with the sales and another one with returns. So we provide a little bit extra information about a specific part of the business. You still have the KPIs on top and trends over time, a map as you can see here, but you also have here already some slicers and filters, and probably you do have here some drill throughs. You also have things like you can switch the kind of visual you're seeing, a table or a chart, so you can see. Even the interactivity is a lot different for this kind of persona and kind of report than the interactivity that you usually have for the dashboard or executive kind of persona. They don't want to do too many clicks. So I think you can realize or start to realize now the importance that defining the right persona and defining the right report type will have in the way you will design your report later on. Let's talk about the operational type of reports. The operational users or information workers use information to enhance how they perform their role on a day-to-day basis. This means that this will be the most granular reports that you will have to create, unless you're creating a more generic report, of course. There are an infinite number of operational roles that we can have in any company, but let's imagine store manager or stock controller or sales manager. The report type that they usually go for, as we discussed already, is a report that is way more granular, multiple report pages, drill-throughs, tooltips, interactions everywhere, so that they can truly analyze in a lot of detail what is happening with that particular process or with that particular area of the business. In terms of granularity, I think, and I will probably repeat myself, and you probably got the idea already, but I will indeed repeat myself. This is a very low-level kind of report, very granular, low-level metrics with the ability to drill through to transactional type of data, which can be a lot of data. Because you're diving into such a granular level, you usually don't want to see like 5 years worth of data. You want to see data for the last few months, or usually up to 1 year max worth of data. It can be aggregated at day level, week level, and those reports should be answering questions such as what is happening right now and what action should I take right now. In this case, you have a lot more flexibility with the visualization types that you can use. I mean, you can use any type of visualization in any type of reports, right? But having in mind the personas, in this case, the operational type of persona, you will have a lot more flexibility and you can go crazy with tables and matrices, conditional formatting, drill-throughs, tooltips, and all of that. So it is supposed to be quite a granular report in a way, and a complex report. So you can get a little bit more creative, I would say here. As you can see in this example, we already have a table. I mean, it's still quite a simple example, I would say. I think most operational reports will look way more complex than this, but you can see we still have that interactive element, the navigation pane. We still have the slicers or filters. We still have KPIs, line charts with trends over time. But then we have the granular bit, which is like tables with conditional formatting, which helps your users understand if the insights they are looking at are bad or good, or what do they represent in the business, for the business. Educational or general reports assume that the report user is not familiar with the data or context. So the reports must provide clear guidance to help them understanding the insights they are looking at. As you can see from this slide, we can say that for this type of persona and report, there are no rules. You just need to make sure that everyone that opens your report will know how to use it and will understand the insights that it is showing. This is the most important part. These are probably the type of reports that you will build for your portfolio. So yes, you can be very creative when creating your portfolio or when building the reports for your portfolio. I would say, or I would add, not just you can, but you should be very creative when creating reports to show as part of your portfolio. Let's now have a look at the example. In this case, this example is probably not the happiest of them all and probably a little bit old, but it is a very good example because it's kind of a generic topic, not necessarily generic, but I think you understand what I mean. You can see that there is a lot more text everywhere, and this is the purpose of the more general type of reports for the more general type of user. Like I mentioned before, it assumes that the user doesn't know much about whatever you're trying to show them, whatever insights you're trying to show with your reports, so you need to be a lot more specific on the way the user should be using that report, how to get insights from that report, and how to use it generally. So when building reports of this type, just pay attention and always remember that your end user will probably not know exactly what you're trying to show them. So you need to be very clear and very specific on that, on the way you build your report, and help them understand it. You definitely need to think about the user experience here, and you need to think about that a lot, because I think it will usually influence the adoption of your final solution. So to finalize, let's just go over the complete list of questions to successfully determine your audience or personas and your report type. The first question you should be asking your stakeholders in your requirements gathering meeting or session is who is the audience for this solution, and give examples like CFO, business analyst, operational analysts, specific team within the business, because this alone will give you a very good overview of the type of persona and the type of report that you will have to create later on. The second question you should ask is what's the level of granularity your end users usually need to make their data-driven decisions? Again, a very good question that will allow you to understand if the persona or the type of persona matches the type of report for that persona, because sometimes they don't match. And sometimes an executive will just say, I want to see a table, but what you need to do is to try and understand if he or she really does need to look at the table or a table, because once more, people always know what they want, but very often they don't know what they need. So sometimes they need something different from what they want, and that's your job to figure out and give them the best solution possible based on your findings. And the third and final question will be, how far back in time do you usually need to go to get the insights you need? This will help you evaluate how much historical data will you need to include in your report. This was all for the identifying your audience and report type lesson, and I'll see you now in the defining URI requirements lesson.